EthioEMR, Ethiopia's multi-tenant electronic medical record platform. In this short guide, I will show you how to register a patient in the central triage and in the emergency triage and process payment. First, go to the link that has been provided for you and enter your login, username and password to access the EthioEMR. Once you are there, choose the location that you are in and click on Remember My Location for future logins and confirm. You will get a notification that says Location Saved. Once you log in, you will be able to access the EthioEMR platform. Once you enter the platform, the first thing that we need to do is to register a new patient. Here, we bring in the health ID that we registered in the previous video, or we input the health ID that has been provided for us by the patient. Once we enter the health ID and search for it, it will automatically populate from the health ID the patient's details. If the patient has any medical legal cases, we can click this. If the patient has any disability status, we can click this. Otherwise, we go to register patient. Once we do that, we'll get a notification that says patient has been registered successfully. Then we will be able to look at the patient vital form once we select what type of patient it is. In the vital form, we have the option to put in a provider and location. Then here we will have different vital sign inputs such as pulse, blood pressure, systolic, diastolic, whether the patient has come in a sitting or supine position, temperature, rate, saturation, so you can see the normal values here, weight, height, then it will automatically calculate the BMI for us. Then we will click on save. Once we click on the save, we'll get a notification that form has been submitted successfully. We will go to the queue location and select where this patient will be queued. Once we select the queue location, we select the room which they will queue in. Then we have the option to choose emergency, not urgent, and urgent. If it is an obvious emergency, then they can we will directly register them in the emergency triage section of the EthioEMR. However, if it's not an obvious emergency, then a qualified nurse would have to assess and decide whether it is an emergency or an urgent case. Anyways, we can add the patient to queue. Here we will get a notification that the patient has been successfully added to queue. Here we can also search for the patient. If it is not a new patient, instead of directly going to new patient, we can directly search the patient with their health ID. We can see here their information, their age, their date of birth, their EthioEMR ID, and their health ID, and we can directly select the patient in this way and populate the form in this matter. Done that, but it's another way of searching. We can also go to the central triage and also search for the patient in by their numbers, by their names. So we can also use this search function to find patients. Once we have added the patient into the queue, we can then go to MRU. But before we go to MRU, let's first see how to register a patient if they come in an emergency way. If they come in as an emergency, we can directly, in the same way, add them as a new patient. We can enter the health ID if the patient is able to do so, but if the patient is not able to do so, then we will have to put in a placeholder for that person to be registered. We put in estimated dates of birth and admit the patient in that way. Then here it will take us directly to the different emergency rooms because we are in the emergency triage section. If we select ART, and we can select them into the ART queue, and then we select the emergency. But once they come to the emergency, if we feel that they are not an emergency, we can still put them back to the regular triage. Then we click continue to triage, and we can insert the general information that is needed for the emergency patient. We'll have the time, when they came in, if there's any medical legal case, if it's a road traffic injury, we have the option to select it. If there has been any trauma, we can select it. If there's any contact person with them, we can register it here. Then we can register the different problems that they have come with, and they're different. We put in the status that they are in, whether they came walking or with a stretcher, whether they are alert or they are unresponsive, if they've been in trauma. Different items here in the triage vital form, clinical form can be filled out. That form is submitted and we are able to go to the service queue and find this person in the emergency service queue. So here we can filter patients by where they are or what status that they are in. We can filter them by their location. We can filter them by the different service that they are being provided. In that case, if you can see the emergency I registered is here in the ART queue that we put after registering for emergency. Let's continue. So once we finalize registering a patient in the central triage or the emergency triage, then we come to the medical record unit. We select our patient or we search for our patient and we can find them. And here we will find two pieces of information: edit patient information and add billing information. The edit patient information will allow us to view any demographic data that we have not already entered. As you can see, their health ID and EthioEMR ID is here, their address is here, but maybe optional Cavalier and house number are not here. Email addresses can be put there. Next of kin, relationship, death info. But we go to billing information, because billing information has to be added for the patient to be served. Therefore, when we go to billing information, we will find different options: cash, CBHI, if they're free, mobile money, SHI, and so forth. For this example, let's choose cash, and the billing service can be a clinical consultation. We add the billable service. Once we edit the billing information or add the bill, then immediately we go to accounting. This is the portal for the cashier or accountant. Here there are different options. Here it will show you how much bills were collected that day, how many bills were paid, how many are pending, how many are exempted. Here there is an option to switch payment point. If they are placed in the lab, in the different rooms of the hospital, in the triage, they can switch payment point. There's also an option to clock in and clock out for the different accountants or cashiers. When we see today's bills, we can see our patient right here as pending, as not being paid, or if we cannot find it, we can go here and search for the patient and be able to find their information. We know that they are waiting for clinical consultation. Once we click on that, we will be able to see the details here, such as invoice number, date, the status, where the cash point is, who the cashier is, how much it is, and the remaining balance. We will see the amount here. We can increase or decrease, and then we can process the payment. You will get a pop-up which will allow us to confirm the payment. Once payment is confirmed, we can print the different bills, the invoice, the receipt, and the bill statement, especially for inpatients. Additional payment options are also here. So in this way, we navigate back to the service queue. Once this patient has made their payment, they go back to the service queue. They will be able to access their services. Here we go to the list and we search for the patients. Here we can see information such as queue number, whether they're a priority or not, which room they're coming from, what their status is, if they've been transferred from another department, where their queue is, and what their waiting time is. Therefore, here we can call them or we can move them to another department, we can transition them to the next step, we can edit or remove the patient. Then here we will call them and serve them, or we can requeue them if we want to send them to the back of the line. Click serve, then we are successfully redirected to the patient chart, in which the OPD doctor or service provider will be able to see. So this process brings us to move from how when patient walks in all the way to being served in the OPD. Thank you.